Hello, everybody. Welcome to another webinar of the Media Education Lab. This is another one in the series of youth media, and I'm very excited to have my colleague and friend, Tom Flint, who we're going back several years when he was at RISD talking about youth media and how to structure his great experience that he had in Japan and here doing intercultural communication using youth media, and now with the organization of film building, I think really gets to like the profession and with the examples that Tom will share. So I think that's enough introduction. Tom, I'll let you start. Looking forward to hearing your presentation today.
Great. Thank you so much, Yanti. It's a pleasure to be here, and I recognize some folks here in the audience. So thanks so much for coming out to the people I know, the people I don't know. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I hope to kind of impart some of my experience and inspire those that are here to experiment really with moving image education and media. So I'm going to pull up really quickly a slideshow presentation. I'll try sharing my screen here. And let's see, okay. Go full screen with this first. Okay. Can everybody see this okay? Great. Wonderful. Okay, so yes, as Yanti said, my name is Tom Flint. I'm a moving image educator and also a filmmaker. I'm based in the greater Boston area, and I hold a BA in Film and Media Arts from Temple University in Philadelphia, and also a MA in Art and Design Education from the Rhode Island School of Design. As Yanti had mentioned, I spent 15 years living overseas in Japan, where I did a lot of different things, one of which was to teach documentary filmmaking to high school students at an international school, which is really what got me going into moving image education and led me on this path that I've been on for the last, I guess, 8 or 9 years, working in the field. So today I'll be talking about a program that I founded and run called Filmbuilding, which essentially meets at the crossroads of visual storytelling, cross-cultural exchange, and civic engagement. And Filmbuilding is not only a program, it's also a theoretical approach to media making, which explores how meaningful connections can be made during times of great divide and uncertainty, which is, of course, what we're going through right now. You're going to be learning about how we take a bit of an unusual approach, pedagogical approach at Filmbuilding, which I think really has the potential to open things up and impact students in a wide variety of learning environments. So what is Filmbuilding? It's an educational initiative that runs discovery-based filmmaking experiences for change. We've been running workshops since 2018 that involve folks coming together across diverse lived experiences and sometimes great distances to co-create films together. This is a slide of the process, a quick graphic that kind of shows at the top here, the top layer, the participants, who are most often youth, coming together from different backgrounds with different perspectives. They might be coming together from different parts of the world, living in different countries. They might be coming together from different schools that are within the same city. But the point is that they are people who would otherwise not have a chance to meet each other coming together to create. And below that, we have this process of co-creation, where the film builders are working in groups and participating and blending their ideas together to create the third layer below, which is the finished film, which ultimately becomes an authentic representation of their ideas and perspectives. And what we do at Filmbuilding below that is we pay a lot of attention to the viewing experience, understanding that film is kind of recreated, or some people might say created for the first time, when it's committed to the minds and the memories of the people who actually watch it. So we have really deep discussions around the films that are screened with our viewers, and we invite different interpretations, and we do participatory programming to kind of reactivate the films that are made. So I'm going to screen just really quickly a quick teaser. So I think I have to maybe unshare and then share again. This is just a just quick 1 minute overview of the film building program. So bear with me here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so let me pull this up once again. Back to the slideshow. There's probably an easier way to do this, but I can't figure it out. Okay, here we go. All right, so back to this. Great, so I'm going to be diving in just a moment to a couple of specific workshops that I've held that get at. Did everyone hear me okay? Yep, okay. That kind of get at what the approach kind of entails. But I wanted to just take a quick moment to talk a little bit about what we do, which is this very, as I mentioned, open-ended, discovery-based approach to media making, which was in many ways inspired by a lot of personal experiences, most importantly, my years spent in Japan. And it counters in many ways what I was taught as a student in America, as a film student. And as you can all understand and imagine, with the Hollywood industry being the way it is over here in such a dominant form, you find a lot of educational programs working with media in which that filters down into it. And a lot of those programs that are kind of closely adhere to the industry kind of standards and the way that films are made within the industry have really, really great strengths and benefits. But I began to look at other approaches that involved something that looked more closely at the aspect of co-creation and the idea that when you make a film, it takes a village. You are getting people from different lived experiences with perspectives to come together to create something. And oftentimes, because of the hierarchical structure and the ends-driven approach that's connected to all these capitalist ideologies within the US, that kind of falls by the wayside. So we are really experimenting with that aspect of co-creation and embracing a less teleological approach in film building. So I'm going to go over just a few things that I believe, kind of differentiate a discovery-based approach from how movies are made in a more conventional setting. So first off, conventional filmmaking is a lot about exercising control as a director, as an artist. But in the case of discovery-based filmmaking, you are asking to relinquish that control to a certain degree. And that is one example of how it ties to a lot of Eastern philosophy, the idea of letting go and embracing the process. Conventional filmmaking is oftentimes result-oriented, that connection to the Hollywood industry, but discovery-based filmmaking is very process-oriented. So we're looking very closely at what is being learned throughout the process. And I heard a great quote from somebody that I worked with in Japan, and he's a filmmaker, and he said, if I know what my film is about, what's the point of making it? So he was basically saying, why make films if we already know what we want to say? It's the opportunity to create a film with other people that allows us to discover new things and find a voice or what we want to say. Conventional filmmaking relies on a script. Discovery-based filmmaking relies a lot on improvisation, whether it's acting, whether it's figuring out where you're going to be filming, which angles you're going to be using. That a lot of times happens on the spot when we're making films without a script. And I think that is able to exercise parts of the brain that don't get as much exercise in education, unfortunately. A lot of what we're kind of set up for in education all around the world really is pre-planning everything out and executing according to plan. But I think we lose a lot when that is overemphasized. Conventional filmmaking is motivated by, I'm sorry, conventional filmmaking is very role-based and hierarchical, whereas discovery-based filmmaking values co-creation. So everyone is a co-creator, everyone's a director, everyone's an editor, right? Conventional filmmaking is motivated by rationality and reason, but discovery-based filmmaking is motivated by intuition, right? And finally, conventional filmmaking is about creating your world, right? It's a lot about self-expression, how to create your world, whereas discovery-based filmmaking is about discovering the world through cinema, through media making. So I found through these workshops, instead of, trying to make statements, the students are asking questions more often than not. They're trying to understand each other. So they're speaking to be understood, and they're kind of moving from more of a conviction or a certainty to more of a curiosity. So if I had to kind of sum it all up, I would say it transcends self-expression and moves more into the grounds of self-cultivation through film. So this is just a collage with some different workshop images that we've held. The first ever film building workshop that I did back in 2018, right after I graduated from my MA program at RISD, involved high school students that I had taught in Japan coming to the Boston area and teaming up with a group of high school students in Boston. And we had 12 total students, and we divided them into 3 different cross-cultural groups where each group had 2 Japanese students and 2 US-based students. And they had to explore the theme in between through this 3-day period. And it was kind of creativity within certain constraints where they were free to explore on their own, develop their films as they wanted, but each of the 3 groups had to create a short film inspired by the theme in between and kind of do all the problem solving themselves. And we had a few other kind of parameters that we put in there where each of the group members had to appear in the film. I think they had to use Japanese and English in the film to kind of dig out some of their cultural identities and things like that. But these tend to vary depending on the workshop. When the pandemic hit, we switched completely over to virtual workshops, obviously because we couldn't meet in person. And it turned out to be a total blessing in disguise because since then we've held the majority of our workshops on video conferencing using Zoom and cloud-based editing so that students can actually connect regardless of where they are in the world and co-create movies together. So that has allowed film building to evolve into a really kind of hyper-inclusive program where, basically any student with access to a phone that has a camera on it, which is a lot of kids these days, and a computer with Zoom or any kind of video conference can take part. So yeah, there are a lot of connections that we've been trying to find between principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, and filmmaking that resonate through film building. We're always trying to look at new ways to explore that. So I'd like to really quickly look at an instance which took full advantage of this virtual kind of setting. This was a workshop that took place back in 2021, I think, in the midst of the pandemic. And it involved students from 4 different sister cities exploring the theme resemblances. There's some partners there at the bottom that we got involved, including the Bellingham, Washington Sister Cities Association. And Bellingham has cities, sister cities all over the world, I think about 11 or 12. So we were able to find youth from 4 of those different sister cities, which were Bellingham, Washington, Tateyama, Japan, Vasa, Finland, and Port Stephens, Australia. And like we did with the in-between workshop with the Japanese and the American youth, we divided all these youth into 4 different groups, with about 4 members each, and each group had members from each of those representative countries. Needless to say, navigating the time difference was a real challenge. I was tuning in from Boston at like 1 in the morning. The Finland-based students were tuning in very early in the morning, like at 7. The West Coast students were in the afternoon. They were okay. And then the Boston-based students, or no, sorry, the West Coast students were in the morning, I believe. Boston-based, and the Japanese and the Australian students were in the afternoon. It was a lot, but we managed to pull it off. Okay. So these are just some still images from some of the films that were made. As I mentioned, the students worked in these different cross-cultural groups that each had to co-create their own film. And it was a combination of both synchronous and asynchronous work. We had daily meetups on Zoom, where each of the groups would spend most of their time in breakout rooms, working from prompts and talking about some of the assets they had. Were any of the group members able to play a musical instrument that might contribute to the score used in their film? Did any of the group members have access to any interesting locations that might be used in the film, and so on and so forth? So we really encouraged the participants, because it was a sister city kind of sponsored program, to think about the resemblances between their cities and their locations. And all the groups were quick to find that they were all cities on water. All 4 of the cities that were taking place, they were all coastal cities. So that unsurprisingly appeared as a theme in all the films. Between the Zoom check-ins, the members went out individually in their respective neighborhoods and countries and captured footage based on the discussions that their groups had. And then they would upload that footage to a cloud-based editing program called WeVideo, and then they would edit synchronously back on Zoom. And the editing sessions were kind of fun to observe, because they would go on for hours and hours and hours. And we had time limits, of course. I had to get to bed at like 3 o'clock in the morning, but the kids just wanted to continue. And there was a lot of tinkering and, frankly, a lot of discussions that had nothing to do with film and the project they were working on. But they were able to build a lot of friendships, and it was just really inspiring to see. It's just a quick snapshot of the ending of the workshop. We end all of our workshops with a premiere. The online ones are virtual premieres, and we screen the films. And as I mentioned before, we invite the audience to interpret and ask questions, and the participants talk about the creative process, and the challenges they faced and the curiosities they developed, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to screen just one more film. This is a film that came out of this workshop, and the title of this film is A Day in the Life. And I will bring this up here.
Make sure when you share, there is those 2 little boxes on the bottom that you share also the audio, because last time it was a little bit sketchy because we couldn't hear them.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you for reminding. Yes. Share sound. Okay. Great. Thanks, Yanti. Okay. Here we go. So this was one of the films created by one of the groups over this 3-day workshop. Okay, great. Go back to sharing my screen. Okay, here we are. So just to quickly check, can everyone see the screen now? Okay, great, great. Yeah, so I love watching that film. I think more than anything, it's really about what it's like to be alive. Um, we talked obviously at the screening event about the meaning behind the films and how the groups kind of talked and in some cases struggled to find out how to explore that theme of resemblances. But I remember in the discussion following this film, we talked a lot about just um, obviously some of the similarities and the differences that we have. And I think one thing I like about this film and most of the film building films that are created across these great distances is that I can identify some of the shots in that movie as, oh, that's Japan, okay, that's probably America. But a lot of the shots, I don't know where they were filmed. And I think that speaks to something that we're really aspiring to do with film building is to affirm our diversity, obviously, because I think filmmaking inherently does that, especially in a co-creative way. It affirms how unique we are in our own way. But at the same time, and it's about showing how we're all the same. So that's something that I think thinking non-dualistically about that. Yes, we're very different and unique, but we're also all the same. And I think that film captures that really beautifully. Um, so I'm going to advance on to some of the takeaways from this workshop and other workshops. Um, you know, there was a lot of building of empathy and cultural understanding and curiosities, as I mentioned, taking place between the groups. There were a lot of questions asked at the screening as well, about different shots or moments in all the films, so the audience got to develop curiosity. These connections have continued. So skipping down to real world connections, so the connections have continued, the friendships have continued. So these folks continue to keep in touch with each other. Obviously, the connections between the organizations that were participating as well. It has that diplomatic edge to kind of reinforce the reason why we have sister cities, and find ways through the arts and through media to keep that going, especially during these very divisive times. Collaborative problem solving. I think that's a skill that ends up surfacing in a lot of the stuff that we do in school. Probably not as much as it should, but I think this is a great example of how that can take place in media making. And also adaptive and reflexive thinking. We borrow a lot from design thinking principles, because we're not using a script, because we're working from these open-ended themes. It kind of encourages the groups and the participants to think that way. And then just in the background here, I'll just quickly mention this is a snapshot from the thesis I wrote at RISD, that explored alternative approaches to moving image education. So this is as film building was kind of coming into fruition. So there's a lot of things that I identified in a more discovery-based approach to filmmaking that are here and kind of continue to inspire the work that we do. Great. So I'm going to move on to one other example of a workshop that I did. I'm not going to spend quite as much time talking about this. But I want to just use it as an example to show the range of applications that can happen within media making and what film building is trying to do. And just shows that it goes beyond being just an educational program, and it's about so much more. So this is Filmbuilding Malden. It's a workshop that took place last year in Malden, Massachusetts, which is a city of about 65,000 people, just north of Boston, with an incredibly diverse population, ethnically diverse population. There are over 60 languages spoken in the public school system. I think 40% of the population are born overseas. There's this organization called the Immigrant Learning Center, which is based in Malden. So just wonderful, wonderful kind of testing ground to do a film building workshop. So this is a look at the program timeline, which took place over about a year and a half. The workshop itself was during the summer and the fall of last year, but there was a lot of planning beforehand, as you can see. Similar to the resemblances workshop that we just looked at, this involved folks coming together across diverse lived experiences to co-create short films. However, unlike resemblances, this took place entirely within a single community and involved really a cross-section of Malden's citizens. And we recruited 25 film builders, ranging in age from 23 to upper 70s, to explore the theme in groups of who is Malden. It incorporated elements of community exploration, civic engagement, and creative placemaking as well. That was part of the grant that we got from the city of Malden. And it was done in partnership with several organizations and nonprofits, one of which is a Cambridge-based organization over here in Boston called Essential Partners, which focuses on dialogue between people across differences. So the city loved our idea of using co-creative storytelling to put Malden on the arts and culture map, and also to build a sense of place and unity among its really diverse population. We wanted to kind of reimagine the film going experience in a post-COVID era. Another reason why the city was so excited about this. And we worked very closely with them to choose screening venues for each of the films that was made that would attract different audiences into the screening space and activate targeted neighborhoods, which is how it connected with elements of creative placemaking. And the post-screening discussions were fabulous. You know, a lot of people turned up, people that don't typically attend film screenings. That was really one of the things that we looked at. One of the points of this exercise was to really open that up. The mayor of Malden attended all of the screenings, which was cool. And in one instance, one of the films called Green Elephant, which was made by our youngest group, went into the housing crisis. They were exploring who is Malden. And about a month in, they really started to settle on the housing crisis because they were going out and interviewing people around the city. They were continuing to see people without homes and affordable, talk to people about affordable housing prices going up and I'm sorry, lack of affordable housing and housing prices going up in general. So they decided to explore that. And when that screened at City Hall with the mayor there, it turned into a dialogue between the audience and the filmmakers who were up on the panel. And a week later, an article came out about the housing market in Malden. And the film builders were invited back to screen their film at a different venue to talk more about that and what they had learned through the experience. So that's just like a micro example of how making a movie can connect to what's happening in the real world. Great. So this is just one thing. This is, part of our work with the city involved creating an impact report, which we're still working on. So we looked at really innovative forms of documentation. Along with the 5 films that were made, the participants recorded video diaries during the process and took part in roundtable discussions to talk about their experience. This is a map that shows locations around Malden that were featured in the movies that they filmed. So the program was really successful, and it's evolved into an initiative within Filmbuilding called Our City in Motion. And we're actually doing it again this summer in Malden, which is really exciting. Although we're doing it this year with youth. And full disclosure, I kind of, I like working more with youth than I do with adults. We found out a lot through this program, Filmbuilding Malden, that when you get older, you become more kind of firm in your beliefs, and we experienced some challenges there, which were great to kind of see take place and learn from. But I found that working with youth and the flexibility and the malleability of their minds is just so perfect for the type of discovery-based approach that we do. And I think adults, thinking more logically and rationally about how they actually create something, would prefer something that's more structured and so on and so forth. But that being said, it was a great experience, and we're going to be doing it again with youth, and bring more stories out there for people to see. So kind of getting close to the end here. I think that because of the process-oriented and discovery-based approach that we take at film building, it really allows the workshops to have a variety of different applications that it otherwise wouldn't. Just earlier today, I think some of the folks in the session here know this. I kicked off a film building workshop at the Lincoln Sudbury Regional High School, which is in the high school that I graduated from in Sudbury, Massachusetts, which is being done in partnership with the METCO program, which is a Boston-based racial integration program that's been around for decades and being fully funded by the EMA Foundation. And the pilot workshop that we just kicked off is a 6-week program that's going to involve these Boston-based METCO students co-creating short films with the Sudbury and Lincoln suburban-based students, exploring the theme belonging. So we just kicked it off and we're excited about where that's going to go. I'm also developing an instance at the Mass Correctional Institute in Shirley, Massachusetts. And we are looking at how film might be used to dismantle, some of the barriers between people in custody and also prison officers, having those folks actually co-create films together. So, along with building films that explore restorative justice and racial inequality, we're really starting to consider other real world applications and issues that might be engaged. So I will close here so that we can have time for a little bit of dialogue and questions. If you'd like to learn more or start a conversation, feel free to reach out. And we're always looking for more students to take part in the work that we're doing. That always seems to be the biggest challenge is finding the participants. So got any people that might be interested, then please get in touch.
Awesome. Thank you. So first question for me, I'll start, is really going back to the COVID time and the film that you share with us. I would love to hear behind the scene. That's always like my first thing, because doing it for 25 years, I know that it never works as smoothly as some people might think or might want to remember that it was. I know that every time it's nerve-wracking and always there is, and here you're working like with multiple continents, different time zones. So you're like putting more complexity to a process that is already complex, and with editing and who's the editor and who's putting where and what. So it's a beautiful film, but I'm sure there is a story behind it and I would love to hear it.
Yeah. So not only I'll just back up a little bit and talk about the workshop and how it was formed. As I mentioned, we did it under the auspices of the Bellingham, Washington State Sister Cities Association. And they had these partnerships through the Sister City organization with folks and educators in these different sister cities. So we wanted to find out how many different locations might be able to take place in such a workshop as we were developing it. So we were able to kind of behind the scenes make those connections much more easily than we otherwise would have been able to. So that was set up. We were able to recruit those, I think, 15 or 16 students. And then we divided them into the groups, making sure that, each of the groups, most of the groups had representation from those 4 different sister cities. And we did that with the help of the people on the ground in each of those locations, because dynamics, I think one of the things that you're getting at, Yanti, the dynamics can often be really tricky. And it's not as simple as just, we'll put all these folks in this group and all these folks in this group. You have to think a lot about, age and, personality and language ability and stuff like that. I will say that during the actual workshop, which was a 3-day workshop, I think it was a Friday to Sunday, with, I think, 4 or 5 check-ins during that period, things went really smoothly. I was not present for a lot of what took place in those breakout rooms. For each of the check-ins, we would always start with kind of like an introduction, just kind of, we might do an icebreaker. This is all on Zoom, of course. And then we would send the groups into their breakout rooms. when I did get a chance to go into those breakout rooms, because I would bounce around with help from the other two facilitators, what we tended to see was, the participants just having a really, really good time, oftentimes not talking about the film itself. I think what oftentimes happens during these film building instances is, during the first moments when the groups start working with one another, it can be very awkward, because a lot of these people are making movies for the first time. They're like, wait, so how do I do this? Because we're not taking that more ends-driven approach where you write the script and so on and so forth. So what I can say over the years is I've learned that it really is important to have a certain amount of structure. It's not like discovery-based filmmaking is just we forget about structure, we give them the theme, and then they go for it. It's kind of an invisible scaffolding, I would say, that we don't want the students to necessarily be aware of. It's just really creating that container for them to create freely within, and sometimes giving them parameters and prompts. And for the workshop that we just started today at the Lincoln Sudbury Regional High School, I worked with the other people that are facilitating to come up with an initial assignment. So they're working in 4 different groups of 4 students each, and they are exploring belonging. And the first week of the 6-week workshop is going to involve individual work, where all 16 of the students will go out with their phones and individually capture kind of a scavenger. It's like a cinematic scavenger hunt. They're going to capture different concepts that we wrote down, such as what's the opposite of distance, or what does home mean to me, things like that. And then starting next week, they will have already shot that footage. They've already been communicating with their group. Then they can kind of get going on the main project and start to put together footage. So maybe that's kind of a long-winded way of answering your question, but it is about finding a way to kind of comfortably allow the students to start working with each other before they take off.
And what I love, and we've been talking about it for years, is that unlike a lot of other filmmakers who are teaching film educator, you're really putting the social and emotional learning into it and connecting it in a coherent way. And I'm a big proponent of that. So I really appreciate how it's like really holistic view and looking at it, and not just, okay, you need to do, pre-production, production, post-production, and that's it. So
Yeah,
it's a great way.
yeah, I think it's really playing into the strengths of kids that age, in their teenage years, where there is kind of in many ways, an improvisational aspect to how we live our lives. And the older we get, by default, the more we lose that. And going back to what education teaches us, it teaches us structure, it teaches us conformity, it teaches us, all kinds of things that in many ways are beneficial. But if you have 95 perhaps, or however much of your educational experience pushing you in that direction, there are a lot of skill sets that fall by the wayside and are just simply lost. And I think it's really important, connecting with the world we're living in right now, to keep that flexibility of mind and learn how to step outside one's comfort zone and take risks in certain ways. And I think art is really the best way to do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, let's open up for question. I don't know, Bill, if you have any question. Bob, Brendo, Lucia, Joanne, Joshua. You can put in the chat or unmute yourself, and let's hear. What questions do you have to Tom?
I'm wondering if you could just expand a little more on what you said about the challenges you had working with adults, because that's something that I had always, stayed away from for a little bit of, but particularly in the intergenerational context, and and what did work, as well as what didn't, and kind of just more specifics on the takeaways from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess somewhat surprisingly, we didn't have any issues at all with the intergenerational conflicts, because we did have some groups, obviously, with that age range where we had folks in their 40s in the same group with folks in their 60s and so on and so forth. We didn't find anything other than maybe just overall philosophically how they approach the project that surfaced there. I think the biggest challenge just came in regards to this very unstructured approach. And to give you an example, we really encouraged the film builders to do a lot of filming. And we said it's good to go out earlier on in the project and capture a lot of footage after your group has discussed who is Malden and come up with your assets and talk about, locations you might film at, special skill sets you have, people you know. And then once you've done that and started to build your story, it's good to go out and just record a lot of footage. And we would say things like, when you go out and record, it's good to have, you always want to have that filmmaker's perspective, but it's okay to not know what you want. And so sometimes if you're just taking the bus and, taking the bus through Malden, take the camera and just point it out the window, because when you have a camera in your hands, it inevitably allows you to see the world a little bit differently. So we were really encouraging that throughout the workshop, and even up until the editing phase. One thing that we try to decompartmentalize the pre-production, production, post-production. They all kind of blend together, especially pre-production and production. But even in editing, we see that as a huge opportunity to continue building your story for more learning. And we were really trying to push that with the adults, and they were just like, you keep on telling us to film. We need to find our story. We need to find, and it's like, yes, but there's also this opportunity. So I would say if I had known that going in and how difficult it was for them to work outside of that, like in a very unstructured way and just kind of trust the process, I would have done it very, very differently. And we would have done more teaching, skills related to we would have taught editing a lot more. They did learn editing, but that was more introduced in the middle of the project. We would have taught it from the beginning because there were a lot of questions about that. So I think just discomfort with lack of structure was the big thing that tripped up some of the groups. But most of the people had a great experience. I would say everyone involved had both an experience that was full of challenges and excitement and all these things together. And I think filmmaking in the end is that. I love making movies as a filmmaker, but I also hate making movies. It's a nightmare. So they got to experience a bit of that. So yeah.
Thank you for that.
Wow, do you want to ask any question?
Well, yeah, just to tease out a little bit what you were just saying. Can you hear me? About the discomfort with the lack of structure. And just, an example or two of somebody you may have had to really work with who really couldn't handle that. Because I'm just thinking of the prison officers and the administrations of prisons. If there's anything I think they're going to have a problem with, it's lack of structure, since their whole environment is about nothing but structure. And of course, the prisoners, I think, would look forward to doing something unstructured in a big way. But I hope we can get over the hump of what is this guy coming in to do, and what's the structure, or what's the non-structure? I don't know. I'm just curious.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just really quickly, Bob Mara is someone I've come to know quite recently through one of the film builders involved in the Malden project. And Bob does work with restorative justice. He's connected with somebody at the Mass Correctional Institution in Shirley, Massachusetts. And we're now working on a plan to do a workshop inside of the prison. So I think your question is highly relevant. And I'll first respond by saying that, absolutely. I'm finding, I think, more and more through these instances that we do, even with youth, again, the structure is incredibly important. And I think for what we're working on inside of this very specific context, we do need to look very carefully at what structure is needed there. So again, it's not the case that with a more discovery-based, open-ended approach that we're just kind of allowing people to go for it. I'm finding more and more that planting these prompts and kind of assignments in is hugely helpful. And quickly going back to the workshop that we just started today, we gave them that first assignment or exploration today to work on. And we're going to continue doing that during our weekly meetups. So those are scaffoldings, basically, that we're putting in place to allow them to kind of reset a little bit. And because facing a film project is a very daunting task. And if you're trying to look just from the beginning, starting with a theme, really, a concept, and then getting to the end, a final product, it can be completely overwhelming. So I think, again, I'm learning more and more as an educator that it's super important to understand the context of the people you're working with, the environment you're working within, and foresee any challenges that relate to people just not being able to do this. So I think this, for me, at Shirley MCI presents a really, really interesting opportunity that I know I'm going to learn a heck of a lot from. But with Filmbuilding Malden, even though those groups face challenges, they were all able to finish their films. And when we screened them at the final event at the end of October, just this last year, there was just an overwhelming sense of positivity. And so many people came up and they said that was really hard, but man, was it amazing. So yeah, it's nice to see that kind of understanding and completion when the film is finally finished. But when you're going through it, it can be really challenging.
And I'm taking inspiration from a colleague who is doing similar work in Paris, and he's working in jail, and he's coming from a journalistic point of view, and the inmates were like, who cares about our story? Nobody's like, we're being, and he provides a very structural kind of way of telling the story, telling them, no, actually you are, and publishing it in like a big media outlet like Le Figaro, Le Monde, that they are publishing their story. So it's not a film, it's a written story, but they're helping them like do that and finding a voice and finding their own creativity within the structure. So kind of where is the freedom within a structure to kind of deal with all of that, which is super, super challenging. And that's a whole different webinar to go over.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm hoping, I do hope to continue working with adults. Absolutely. I learned so much, and although it was challenging, it was also a lot of fun as I got to know some of these folks. But my hope is that by exposing people who are, in their older years, whether they're in their 40s or in their 70s, to something like this, that it reactivates something that reminds them of possibly their youth, or just reminds them of there are different ways that you can do things. And again, I think society, not only education, but society in general, really pushes us to think a certain way, especially in a place like America with its, capitalist ideologies and, those kind of things. So I think, again, the arts and the media arts in particular are a great opportunity through story to resurface some of those kind of innate and primal instinctual feelings that we have, and we can understand that we can respond to things on a very emotional level, rather than being more so on like a logical level when we create. So yeah, that's why I'd love to continue doing stuff with adults.
And we're out of time. So I want to thank everybody, and really appreciate all of you here coming and engaging in the conversation. Thank you, Tom, for sharing your amazing work, and keep coming and sharing the work that you're doing. And we're looking forward to have you in our next youth media webinar series, or any webinar series of the Media Education Lab. Thank you. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, Yanti. Bye-bye.